Coming to Georgia, President Biden gave his first joint address to Congress. Here are three big takeaways. Climate change and job creation are one and the same for the president. He said the American Jobs Plan will have engineers and construction workers building more energy, efficient buildings and homes. The president also said the jobs plan will help get millions of Americans back to work. Second thing to know, the president unveiled the $1.8 trillion American Families Plan. So this is a federal investment in education, child care, and paid family leave. The plan is to hike up taxes on the rich, with the president saying he wants to reward work, not wealth.
I will not impose any tax increase on people making less than $400,000. But it's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of Americans to just begin to pay their fair share. Just their fair share.
And the third key takeaway tonight, President Biden urged Congress to act on police reform and referencing the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. It has already passed the U.S. House of Representatives. It now needs a debate and a vote in the U.S. Senate.
We have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system, and to enact police reform in George Floyd's name.
Lawmakers on both sides are reacting to the president's address tonight. A lot of Republicans saying it's not enough. We talked to a national RNC spokesperson tonight.
This has been 100 days of failure. I believe that there's a better way to unite the country, a better way to lead the country, and a better way to get us going in the direction that we need that doesn't cost us hundreds of millions of dollars.
Meanwhile, Democrats like Senator Jon Ossoff tell 11 Alive tonight he thinks the country is delivering.
There is much more to do to defeat this virus and rebuild in full, but we have made so much progress, and we've made progress without daily drama and outrage.
All right, so politics aside, history was made in Congress tonight.
Madam Speaker, Madam Vice President, no president has ever said those words from this podium. No president has ever said those words, and it's about time.
Talk about women in power. These photos of Vice President Kamala Harris and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi are going viral. For the first time, two women represented both the Senate and the House during a presidential address. You can read more about the highlights of tonight's speech over on 11alive.com.